We're bringing you the first in a special three-part look at an issue that seems to underpin many of our national anxieties: population. Immigration, the economy, housing, congestion, they all come down to how many people live here. Australia's population growth has radically changed our country during the past few decades. It's influenced by things such as the number of people moving permanently to Australia, a falling birth rate and an ageing population. For the next 3 nights, 7:30's Andy Park is taking a look at how these forces are changing our cities, our suburbs and our regions. Tonight we start in the suburbs to chart the health of the great Australian dream.
The way we're headed, the Australia you grew up in won't be the Australia you retire in. 30% of us weren't even born here anyway. We're a big land with a small population, and that's changing faster than anyone predicted. We are 25 million now, but by the middle of the century, that number will grow to more than 40 million. Just think, 400,000 new people each year. Where are they going to live? How are we going to feed and water them?
I mean, when you're one drop short in a city like this, you've got an emergency. You can't do with water what we do with roads. You can't play catch up.
Just how are we going to fit them in?
We need that as a national conversation. We don't have it at the moment.
2/3 of our population growth comes from overseas migration because we're simply not having babies like we used to.
More than 3.6 million migrants, that is 1 in 7 people in the country, have arrived in the last 20 years.
Our cities draw almost 90% of migrants, adding to the squeeze on housing and on roads. In the last 25 years, the fast-growing outer suburbs have already doubled in population.
Look at this down here. This is just jammed. And that's the whole of Australia.
Some say we need to stay small or at least slow down to maintain the lifestyles we have.
There isn't any consideration about what the long-term impacts are going to be on livability, and really Australia is marching blind.
There's no doubt in my mind that Australia is underpopulated by any definition you'd like to have.
Others say that this record level of growth is essential to propelling us into the future of a big Australia.
In 2050, there are going to be far more opportunities for everyday Australians. The types of workplaces that we have are changing, the types of ways that we commute and the ways that we live are changing, the ways we start relationships are changing.
This is Mickleham, Australia's fastest growing area in Australia's fastest growing state. Apart from clogged roads or packed buses, Australia's explosive growth manifests in a series of often submerged ways. For our smallest Australians, there's already a 6-month waiting list for these learn-to-swim classes in nearby Craigieburn, in a huge new facility the local council only opened a year ago. And have you noticed how quickly this area has grown?
It has grown very, very fast. Like, the demand for schools and resources and facilities like this is unbelievable. Childcare, there is quite a long waiting list. I think we waited about 18 months to get a position for one day. 1, 2.
But here too are contrasting views on just how big Australia could or should be.
If you get another 100 million people, you can feed them here. Because Australia is too big now. Maybe all of us, we live in 10 or 15% of the Australian map. You can say, you can tell, yeah?
So there's room for a big Australia?
Yeah, it is.
What do you hope Australia will look like for your daughter?
I hope that it's not that dissimilar from when I was growing up.
But the lives of these Australians won't resemble their parents.
You know, when I was a young fellow growing up, there was none of this here. It was just open, paddocks, horses, cows, rabbits running around everywhere. And now to look at the change and the development that's occurred, it's just amazing.
Rightly or wrongly, the frustrations of locals are often aimed at the most visible form of government. How many people are coming into your municipality every year?
Yeah, well, we estimated around the 10,000 mark. I suppose the frustration of local people would be, well, how far do I have to travel to get my, 2 litres of milk and my loaf of bread? And they come also with the understanding, I think, that there's not going to be a tram outside their front door.
This type of housing development is typical of Australia, one house to about a quarter acre of land.
Australia was really the first suburban nation. We embraced the suburban ideal, suburban living with great fervour. Most Australians still live in suburban settings and prefer to do so. But our suburbs now face development and planning pressures.
It seems that if there is a solution, we must find it in our own backyard.
Brendan Gleeson is the director of the Melbourne Sustainable Society Institute, and he says the days of a quarter-acre block close to the city with easy public transport and amenities are long gone.
I think we can see that in some of the political and popular discussions going on, that people are really feeling it. Promises of public transport, of health and education facilities that are really on the never-never.
Cheap housing, green fields and estate developments are just the latest chapters in Australia's urban sprawl, transforming our entire notion of Australian suburban life. Doubling in population in the last 25 years, these outer suburbs are now home to 1 in 5 Australians. They account for 11% of GDP and are growing at twice the rate of the rest of the country. There are more workers in suburbs like Mickleham than there were a decade ago, but you see, there are only about the same amount of jobs. In some cases, more than half the population of these dormitory suburbs clear out for work on any given day, putting extraordinary stress and strain on roads and transport and making congestion the most visible sign of Australia's frantic pace of growth. Economist Leith Van Onselen says we're nowhere near ready for a big Australia.
This is one of the big fallacies of rapid population growth. There's this notion that you can just plan for it and we just need to build the infrastructure. But the problem is, in built-out cities like Sydney and Melbourne, where there isn't really any additional space, building out new infrastructure is incredibly expensive.
In fact, the Productivity Commission in 2013 warned that for infrastructure to keep up with population growth over the next 50 years, we would need to spend 5 times what we've spent in the last 50 years. Nowadays, Melbourne's urban sprawl is propelled north by developers at a blistering speed.
This adds a lot to the stress of people's lives. You hear a lot of people talking about wanting to spend that time more with their families or doing other things than sitting in a car.
As you can see, the state of the roads are terrible and they get worse down there.
Andrew Cheney is one of thousands pouring in, pushed out by housing affordability, pulled in by 5% deposits on house and land packages if you can get in early.
I paid about $500,000 for a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house on 576 square metres of land. There's no infrastructure, you're buying at probably the cheapest point. If history tells us anything, that it's like planting a fruit tree. You plant the fruit tree, you water it, you grow, and then you reap the rewards.
Well, many of them, I think, because they're astute investors, are investing in dwellings either in places like Melton outside of Melbourne or Craigieburn, where you can buy a home quite cheaply and pay it off. Young people are having a very different approach to where they want to live and how they're going to manage their financial affairs.
Well, Andrew, this is your Australian dream.
That's it.
It's an incomplete dream.
It's quite incomplete, isn't it?
Do you think that this level of growth is sustainable?
Probably not, no, I wouldn't.
Even though you're part of it?
I'm part of it. Well, we've had immigration, all that sort of stuff occur for forever, That's what Australia's built on, so it is sustainable, but if it's controlled, definitely.
So your mindset is to get in while there's still greenfield land to be developed?
Oh, definitely.
Because it's going to run out?
Well, yeah, definitely. It can go right up to Sydney. Who knows when it's going to stop.
Nearby, a young family is also moving in.
We've got all sorts of cultures, particularly in this street. There's Brazilians next door, we've got Italians, we've got Sri Lankans. I think it's great. trying to get clearance, and I'm happy to do it.
Darren Young's family are 6 weeks into their huge new dream home. They're some of the 18,000 people moving to Victoria from interstate, helping make Melbourne's population almost as big as Sydney's. Is this the last box, hopefully?
I'm hoping so. It's been a massive unpack.
But so bad is the dust kicked up by ongoing construction, they can't dry their clothes outdoors, driving up their energy costs. Well, there's sort of headaches about living in an area that's growing so quickly.
I think the biggest problem is the lack of infrastructure. I mean, it's a great area, but yeah, there's not a lot out here at the moment. The only thing we really have got is a service station.
Population growth really is an opportunity for us to really embrace. However, that means actually also addressing the challenges that might be emerging from it. Population is really the main driver for demand for transport, for water, for energy, for telecommunications.
Enrolments for the local primary school have doubled here in the last 2 years. Darren's preference for a Catholic school in his community is not yet an option.
25-30 minutes to Craigieburn from here, so it is going to be a bit of a hike to us until I get set up, so a school in the area would be nice.
Outer suburban growth areas received 35% of Australia's population growth, but only 13% of federal infrastructure funding.
I think my favourite thing at school is maths. Sports.
This area is growing in more ways than one. It's taken almost 5,000 of the federal government's 12,000 Syrian humanitarian arrivals, like young parents Gina and Ashur.
بس قلت لهم مديانة أنا إنه دانا خجا ولا emergency إنه بلالة قلت لهم يا للسوري قلت لهم دكتوري هاوي تشويمة أنا مديانة بس بايلنا شقية منتصب بشلا رابا قرطة وهلا بزيادة لا ومندي إلى بصورخها hospital.
They are amongst the 35% of local residents born overseas.
Whilst the media and the public were transfixed by the 63,000 asylum seekers arriving by boat, we had over 3.6 million people arriving via planes to Australia, which transformed Australia in terms of its age composition, in terms of its skill composition, and in terms of its ethnic composition.
For those on Australia's suburban frontier, it's about pegging out their patch of green fields while the fields are still green.
I do actually feel like a bit of a pioneer.
As our population hurtles towards 45 million by the middle of the century, this is the engine room of our boundless growth. Today's a kind of a big day, really.
Yeah, definitely. Got the key, ready to...
This is the key to your first home.
Yes.
So, what's it mean to you to look at this house?
People say they create their memories and their dreams in a house. You know, what will this house bring me? Master bedroom in here, kitchen area.
Wow.
You could fit a family in here quite easily.
That story produced by Paige McKenzie. And tomorrow night, in the second part of our series, we'll look at growth on the fringes of our major cities, the so-called urban sprawl.
And is endless growth possible?
No, endless growth isn't possible. We're putting our kids into termite mounds.
The rapid rate of population growth we have at the moment is stressing systems.
We've taken the population from 1,100 in 2009 through to 15,000 today.
The kids, they've got no park. This is the one suburb actually in Sydney where there's no public park. It would be almost like a mini Hong Kong, I think.